Hello, my name's Tipper. Today we're going to be talking about unusual words and phrases in the Appalachian language that start with the letter F. I'm using the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English. So the first one that we'll talk about is, I thought this was interesting. I've never heard anyone say this. And with all these videos, this is what I'm always interested in. You tell me if you've heard it. Maybe it's still hanging on where you live. Maybe your grandpa and grandma said it. Or maybe you use it in everyday speech. Or you're like me and you've never heard it. So this is one that I've never heard of. But I thought it was interesting because it's so related to something that we hear all the time today when you put your kids in time out or your grandkids. So this is face out. So face out was a verb phrase of a child to sit in the corner in punishment for misbehavior. So very similar to what we would use today. We say time out. They're in time out. That was face out is what they used. Faintified or fainty. It's an adjective, feeling suddenly weak or faint. 1952, Wilson Folk Speech, North Carolina. This hot, dry weather makes me feel sickly and faintified. 1967, Dare, faintified equals having a sudden feeling of weakness when sometimes the person loses consciousness. That was Maryville, Tennessee. Fainty, having a sudden feeling of weakness. That was Gatlinburg, Tennessee. 1995 Montgomery collection, I'm a little fainty this morning, and that was said by Cardwell. So there's some people that feel fainty a lot. I might feel weak. We call it the weak trembles. I get the weak trembles sometimes, but I've never actually passed out. I'm not one of those people that pass out easily, apparently, or I've just been lucky or whatever. But Katie, my daughter, she's passed out once or twice, and it's usually the result of something. She hit her knee one time and she passed out. It's a weird thing. But when her and Corey had their wisdom teeth pulled or cut out, not pulled, the faintified come to mind to me because after we were done, they both had them on the same day, and it was just in Blue Ridge, so it wasn't very far away, Blue Ridge, Georgia. We were heading home, and we got to about the first red light coming back this way, and Katie started feeling bad. And then she said she thought she was going to be sick, so we were trying to find somewhere to pull over off the road, you know. And then about the time we pulled over, she said she just said she couldn't see. She couldn't see anything. Well, me and Matt were already a nervous wreck, and then we really started panicking. And then about the time Matt got the car stopped, she fainted. She just fell over. And I was like, oh my gosh, turn around, let's go back, because we didn't know what to expect. You know, they didn't tell us that anything like that might happen. Well, we jumped back in the car. Matt jumped back in the car. He'd got out to help her get out to be sick, what he thought. And she woke up really quickly. She woke right back up. But on the way back, she just kept telling me, and she was squeezing my hand so hard. I was sitting beside her telling me, Mama, I can't see, everything's black. So we were just terrified, you know. Anyway, we got her back to the doctor, and they just took it all in stride. It was like, she just needs to lay down. Her blood pressure just dropped. So they got her back in there in the dentist chair and laid her out, and Matt took Corey home and then come back and got me and Katie was fine. But that's when I think about feeling faintified or fainty. Katie certainly felt fainty that day. This one's really common. I'm sure you've heard it where you live, no matter where you live. I can't believe it's not common throughout the United States. It's fair off of the weather. To clear up, become less cloudy, same as clear off. So 1917 Capehart word list, it may fair up and be a pretty week. So that's still common where I live. People say it's going to fair up today. The clouds are going to be gone, or the rain's going to be gone. 1950 Hall Collection, Del Rio, Tennessee. Now it is raining like 60, and maybe in a few more months it will fair up. So raining like 60, that's as interesting as the fair up one. Fair to middling. If you ask somebody how they're doing, they'll tell you they're fair to middling sometimes. This one's an interesting one. When I first seen it in the dictionary, I thought, well, what's unique about that? And do I do that or do I use that? So then this is more of a grammar than a word. But it's the word fall. So it says a verb, variant past participle forms fell and felon. For frequencies of form, see grammar. So it's telling us to go back in the dictionary and look somewhere else. But 1789, that was a long time ago, French Broad petitions. Some of our citizens have fell a sacrifice to their savage cruelty. So somebody was being cruel to them. 1862, Hedgecock diary. At 3 o'clock, we halted to wait for those who had fell behind in order to make our march to Greensboro as imposing as possible. So fell behind. See, I just can't imagine that everybody don't say that. I'd be like, if we were hiking and Matt might say, "Where's Katie?" I'm like, "Oh, she fell behind. She was looking at those rocks. She'll be on in a minute." So fell, that's the unique uses of fell, though. So here's another one. Roman and Reston, Oakley. Well, I come to find out this tree had grew on an edge of a big cliff. As the tree leaned out over the edge of the cliff, so I had fell over the cliff. I had fallen about 50 feet or more to the bottom. Now, I wouldn't hear felon as much today, but fell in that using, I guess, the wrong tense is what it is. That's still very common. Then there's, of course, to fell a tree. You know, that's common everywhere. And then falls, kind of in that, waterfalls. We might shorten it to falls. I still think that's pretty common everywhere, but it's noted in the dictionary. So there's a fall grape. That's a wild grape. That's Montgomery collection was known to Adams, Brown, Cardwell Jones, Letford, Norris, and Oliver. So we have wild grapes here. I hope I can show them to you in a later video. They're not ripe yet. The ones that grow by the creek we call fox grapes. That's what everybody calls them in this area, fox grapes. And they make good jelly. They make good juice. I've done that before. There's a little bitty tiny black one that is called a possum grape. And they do get ripe in the fall. Both of those are not ripe till later. The possum grape later than the fox grapes, I would say. Anyway, so hopefully I can do a video about that and show you. I have a good story about the possum grape I'll share with you later. Another one with weather for the F's was fallen weather. That's, again, seems like that would be common everywhere. So if it's fallen weather, that means rain or snow or bad weather, a storm is about to come. So it's you can tell maybe if it's real cloudy and it's getting dark, then you know the weather's fallen and it's going to rain in a little while. Weather pretending rain or snow. Let's see, 1938, Justice No End Hollow. By fallen weather, she meant rain or snow. Hall Collection, Sevierville, Tennessee. We're going to have some fallen weather, so maybe they looked outside and could see it was the clouds were gathering, or the temperature was dropping and the clouds were gathering, whatever it was. Fall off, that's a really common one still. If someone falls off, that means they've lost weight. So I might say, I saw him down at the store the other day and he's really fell off. I couldn't believe how much weight he'd lost. So fall off, to lose weight. Honks, 1945, Hans Hawks Dunn. He fell off till he was slim as a rail almost and took to groaning in his sleep and singing love songs about hard-hearted girls. So he fell off from being, I guess, having the lovesick blues is what it sounds like was wrong with him. Fall to, if you fall to something, that means you start. So I might say they started, and this actually happened over the weekend. Katie and Corey's playing music. Well, before I knew it, a couple of people just fell to dancing. They just got up there and just fell to dancing all over the place, and it was really funny. So that's fall to begin. 1939 Hall Collection, Cataloochee, North Carolina. I fell to shooting the bear and shot him 10 times then before I killed him. I don't know if he was a good shot or maybe it was a big bear. That was Will Palmer. 1940, Oakley, Roman Reston. Soon the dogs struck the trail of some kind of animal, and soon they fell to barking. So fell to just means to begin. This is one I've never heard, so I'll be interested to see if you have. Fall to staves. That's a verb phrase. To collapse, fall apart. Fall to staves, S-D-A-V-E-S. Rain, saddlebags. We had a cedar churn, but it fell to staves. That was 1924. A family pie, this is an interesting one. I've never heard this one either, but it makes perfect sense, is a deep dish pie. So I would just say a deep dish pie, but in days gone by, apparently people called those family pies. Especially one made with fruit. In the, let's see, 1972, Peterson, it was documented in Cocke County, Tennessee. Great Smoky Mountain National Park in 1973. Family pie, we called it blackberry, huckleberry, apple, peach. 1973, Medford Longhard Road. Apples were made into apple butter, jelly, cider, as well as pies of all kinds, including the family or deep dish pie. So family pie. I like that. I like that one. Okay, fancy fine. This is an interesting one. So I hear fancy all the time. Like, he got these fancy boots, you ought to see them. Or even, I got a fancy new pot, and it just is so clean and nice and cooks so well. But in this one, the entry is fancy fine. So maybe over the years, the fine part just got dropped. But it's an adjective, showy, impressive. 1943, Justice Bluebird. Then her books would be ready to go to school in their new clothes, each in a fancy fine dress. 1952, Justice Children. Oh, Aunt Sally, Letty Ann cried. What a fancy fine notion. So I don't know, it makes you want to know what notion she had, doesn't it? Farewell to summer, weed. Farewell to autumn. Farewell to summer, noun. Any of several asters, especially the blue aster that blooms only weeks before frost, often made into a tea, same as frostweed, goodbye to summer. So farewell to summerweed. So we have wild asters here, so I'm sure I've seen those, but I've never heard anybody call them a farewell to summerweed. I'll have to start calling them that myself, though. That's a neat one. This one's really common. A lot of times when people are talking about accents of Appalachians or Southern folks, this one will come up. So it's a far piece, but we would say a fur piece. I don't really say a far piece. I say a far piece, I guess. A great distance, or a little piece. So it can be a far piece or it can be a little piece. 1940, Hans Hawks Dunn. It seemed like it was a right far piece to the cave. 1959, Will's Hillbilly Dictionary. It equals a long distance. It's a fur piece to town. So that one's pretty common. This is just, I've never heard this one, but it's an interesting one. A saying, or fast as Snyder's pup. Fast as Snyder's pup. So I've never heard that one, but that's really descriptive and interesting. Fatback. We cook with fatback, and a lot of times in the recipes that I share, people ask me about fatback, so this is good. So fatback is fat meat. It's a noun. Fatty meat from the back of a hog, usually salted, always salted, I would say. Bacon, not bacon, always salted. Salt meat, salt pork. Same as streaked bacon. We do call it streaked meat, streakoline. You'll hear people call it that as well. Hall Collection, Wallen, Tennessee. Speaker quoting from his poem. We loaded the saddle with the old pack sack full of onions and meal and a slice of fatback. So meal, he was talking about cornmeal. So they had onions, cornmeal, and saltback. Excuse me. Onions, meal, and fatback. So that was going to be a pretty good meal. I'm thinking they were going to make cornbread and have an onion and salt and fatback with it. That would be good. 1977, Hamilton, Mountain Memories. Kate would fry strips of fat meat, we called it bacon, and make gravy by stirring flour into the drippings and adding milk. 1982, Paris, here's how sassafras tea is, sass tea, and salt pork is fatback. So he's just saying that's what people call sassafras tea, sass tea, and salt pork, fatback. 1990, Oliver, Cook in Hazel Creek. When a settler wanted a mess of green beans during the winter, they were unstrung, broken up, washed, and put to soak for a while, and then cooked like fresh green beans with fatback or streaky lean for seasoning. So he's talking about leather breeches there when he's talking about washed and put to soak. So those were dried green beans that he was cooking, and then he would cook them the same way as he would the fresh ones, which was to season them with fatback. Fat pine. So fat pine is a natural fire starter made from pine trees. Nature does it. It solidifies that resin down in there. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. We don't actually call it fat pine. We call it rich pine, but there's lots of different, some people call it lightered, some people call it fat lightered. There's lots of different things that people call it, but this is the entry for fat pine. It's a noun, a type of resinous pine tree. This pine in southern Appalachia is an important source of turpentine, pine oil, tar, pitch, and rosin. So we gather it we heat with wood in the winter, so we gather it to start fires with. A knot or piece of wood from such a tree good for kindling or used as a torch. See also pine knot. Some people would just call it a pine knot. And going back to thinking of the fatback, which is not really fatback, but cracklins. Cracklins is what's left in the process of making lard. When you're making lard, that's the little bits and pieces left. So that's really good cracklins to put it in your cornbread and cook it that way. I have a recipe, so I'll try to link to that for that. But anyway, this entry is for fatty bread. They're calling it's cracklin bread's what we would call it, but they're saying another name for it is fatty bread. 1952, Brown, North Carolina folklore. To make, put on a pan of grease to heat, mix a cup of meal and a pinch of salt, add water from the dough, form the dough into a cake and fry it in hot grease. They didn't say nothing about adding the cracklins to it, so I don't know about that. 1984, Wilder, You All Spoken, cracklin bread, usually made with cornmeal. Got me a little friend there. With cornmeal, sometimes with flour, and cracklins, of course. Yes, of course. The first little entry left out the cracklins. Okay, this entry is fault. To blame, find fault, criticize. 1896 word list, blame. It equals fault. It means blame. I didn't fault him for that. 1913, Cape Art, our Southern Highlanders. In mountain vernacular, many words that serve as verbs are only nouns of action or adjectives or even adverbs. Granny kept faulting us all day. 1928, Mass Tall Tales. They ain't no use faulting the boy for something he ain't to blame for. They ain't no use faulting the boy for something he ain't to blame for. Will's Hillbilly Dictionary. I don't fault you for the cow getting out. So fault. I think I still use fault like that, and you definitely hear it from older folks. So I didn't fault him. That was just the best he could do. I didn't fault him. Yeah, so I'll be interested to know if you hear that one. That's probably one that's on its way out for sure, but I do still hear it some. So favor, I like this one because I don't know if your family's like this, but in our family we're always talking about who favors who. It's funny, of course, with Corey and Katie. Instantly we wanted to talk about, when you have kids, who they favor and who they act like and all that. And a lot of you, if you don't know, Corey and Katie are twins, our daughters, and a lot of people don't recognize that and they think it's all the same person. They think, like in the videos where we do the little language stuff, they think it's just one girl doing it instead of two. But anyway, so people have always had a hard time telling Katie and Corey apart, except when they were born. But I'll leave that story for Katie to tell you because she has a really unique take on it. Anyway, but from the beginning, I thought Corey looks just like Matt's family. I just see him. I see his mother, Miss Cindy. I just think she's just like them. When I look at Katie, I see my family. I see the Wilsons. I think I would tell her you're a Wilson up one side and down the other. But then people can't tell them apart, which is funny. Then go back to Corey, how I think she's just like Matt and his mother. Pat, before he passed away, he told me that, all of her growing up years, she reminded him so much of his grandmother, Carrie, that she was just like Carrie. Well, I was only like 5 when Carrie died, and she was a really old lady, and so I don't have many memories of her. But one time, a lady that lives down the road, when she seen Corey, one time I was at her house and had the girls, and she said, that one is just like your grandmother, just like Big Grandma is what we called her, just like her. So she saw whatever Pap did, even though it's just funny. So anyway, favor. So to resemble, a member of one's family in appearance or character, inherit qualities from, to have a disposition toward. So I would say Corey favors the Presleys. I would say Katie favors the Wilsons. So that's really common still here to hear people say who you so and so favors someone in the family. Favorite, I like this one. So I don't know if you're on social media a lot or whatever today, you'll see people say, and I've done this myself, like maybe we'll be at a gig somewhere and we're just having the best time, and I take a picture of Paul, my brother that plays with us, and Corey and Katie, and I might say, and if Matt's there, Matt could be in it too, and I'll say, spending time with my favorites, or I've done that in the past. These are my favorites. Well, it's just, you hear people do that a lot now. It's like I guess a modern day way of saying, you're with those you loved. But I was surprised to see it in the dictionary. So favorite is a noun, a close friend. Now, 1895, Edison and Fairchild, Tennessee Mountains. Me and Abernathy is great favorites. 1996-97 Montgomery collection known to 8 consultants. So it's funny, I would know that today, but I don't think that my knowledge of it comes from growing up in Appalachia. I think it's a modern thing that people say that. I'll be interested to know your take on that, favorites. If you see people do that, say, spending the day with my favorites, or eating lunch with my favorite, or eating supper, or going out fishing with my favorites or something. But I thought it was interesting that it was in the dictionary. These next ones are all about feathers, so I'll just go over them. They're just interesting. So feather dance. So when I hear feather dance, I think of something provocative, but it's not. In the dictionary, a feather dance is a buck dance. If you've ever seen anybody buck dance, you might think that it's similar to clogging. Corey and Katie were cloggers for a long time. Maybe someday I can get them to clog for you. But 1983, Matthews, Cutting a Dido. The feather dance is a local style buck dance, a feather dance that's just a little toe dance. You just kind of move from your knees down, a little feather dance. The old timers said that when you were a smooth dancer, a feather dancer, that you could dance with a bucket of water on your head and never spill it. Now, I've never seen a buck dancer that could dance with a bucket of water on their head and not spill it. That would be something, but I've never seen that. Okay, the next one is feather into. So if you feather into something, to attack or shoot. 1917 Capehart word list, to attack as with arrows piercing to the feather. That's where the feathered. In my lifetime, I've heard if Matt come in and was telling me something that happened and said, and he feathered into him, I would think he started fisticuffs, that they started fighting. That's what I think feathered into means, which I guess it is to attack or not shoot, but I guess maybe that's where it come from. But so to me, feather into means you start walloping on somebody, or fisticuffs, getting a fight. Feather-legged, if you're feather-legged, you're cowardly. Wilson Folk Speech, 1952, frightened or cowardly means feather-legged. Feather out, this one makes sense because you think about the birds feathering out, getting their new feathers in. To dress up or wear fancy clothes. 1937 Hall collection, Cades Cove, Tennessee. She was all feathered out. Feather tick, we're all probably familiar with that one. I've never slept on a feather tick, but it's a bed tick filled with feathers on which one sleeps in the winter. I really enjoy sleep. I'm one of those people that I've always been able to sleep good, and I'm thankful for that, and I need a lot of sleep. If I don't have sleep, I act like a 2-year-old that needs a nap. I get weepy and I can't think straight. I just need a lot of sleep, and I enjoy sleep. So I really love my mattress and my bed. I just love sleep, and I'm thankful for it, that I have a warm, dry place to sleep and a nice pillow and nice blankets and all that. So I just can't imagine sleeping on a feather tick. But then, when you think about sleeping on the ground or a pallet, something hard like a floor, I'm sure a feather tick was really nice. Anyway, a feather tick is a bed tick filled with feathers on which one sleeps in winter. I guess in the summer maybe it was too hot. Spring cleaning was another important event in our household. On a bright sunny day, everything in the house was carried outside and the straw ticks were emptied and refilled with fresh straw. The younger fry loved to play hide and seek and turn somersaults among the feather ticks as they lay sunning in the front yard. It's funny, kids always like to jump on the bed, so I guess even then, even though they wasn't beds like we think of today, they still like to jump on them. So that was all of the feather ones. That was interesting. There was a whole little series of feather words, so I liked that. So a feel for is the next one. That's a verb phrase, to be inclined. 1935, Shepherd Cabins in Laurel. He will not make a chair at all because he doesn't feel for to make chairs. Fink's Be at Mountain Speech, be inclined to. I didn't feel for to work. So they didn't feel to work. So to be inclined to, didn't feel for. I guess that's just like us saying, I'm not feeling it today. Maybe I was going to wash my car, but I'm not feeling it, so I'm not going to. So a feel for, to be inclined. That's an interesting one. Let me know if you're familiar with that one. But definitely, you can probably tell that I have a feel for talking about Appalachian language. I'm just plumb foolish about it, and I just really enjoy it, and I hope you do too. Please leave a comment and let me know which words or phrases you were familiar with, which ones you thought were interesting, and please drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.